Hello again, friends, and you are our friends, and good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru right here, wherever you have pulled up to. Try the burgers. We never say that. We never talk about actual food.
I ain't feeling that friendly. I don't know whether. No, go ahead. I'm tired today. I'm tired. I'm so tired of. Well, nevertheless.
What was that? Was that your Bela Lugosi? What was that?
No, tired of Greta
Garbo?
No, goddammit.
I want to be alone.
Young Frankenstein. Help me. Fucking, what's her name? I've gone blank on one of my favorite movies. She's portraying the Marlene Dietrich-like character. I'm so tired. Madeline Kahn, thank you.
Yes.
Good Lord.
Well, a good
Just
good Madeline Kahn to you, wherever you're listening to the show this week. And, of course, you know how it works.
I wonder if Madeline is the mother of Tony Khan.
Oh, that would be an interesting twist right there.
And also, I'm sure he's a fine young man, but it just is, I'm glad it's spelled a different way, because it's amazing to have a wrestling promoter named Khan. That's another Khan job. That's
very good. See, you know, you're making all the headlines for the next 5 years. You're coming up with them right here at the top of the show. Keep going.
No. This will not be. Herb Abrams is a whole different character. We won't go into that now.
Well, you guys know how it works. We answer your questions, or at least we attempt to, and we don't get to everyone's questions, so pipe down. Eventually, we'll try to get to them if it's actually good. Right here on the Drive-Thru, you could submit them either via email to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com, or, of course, on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru, and we've got a bunch of great ones today, Jim.
Well, and before we get to the merriment and get too silly where it's an awkward transition like we do a lot of times here on the program, a couple things we got to mention. First of all, we just heard last week about our friend and Smoky Mountain ring announcer Tommy Noe, who had a stroke recently. And it is back home from last you heard the update on the internet, correct? It's what you read to me. He's back home and doing better, but still has a ways to go. And we just wanted to say, get well to Tommy, because we've told a bunch of stories about him here on the program, including when me and him had to crawl under the ring during the middle of a match, see if I could help fix the video camera. In Johnson City, I believe that one night. So anyway, hopefully Tommy's doing better. We love you, Tommy.
Yeah, get well, Tommy.
He's got a new renaissance in his career with all of the Smoky Mountain attention that the TVs and the big shows and everything are getting. So anyway, and also we heard we're recording this in somewhat of this is real time, and then I'm fixing to go out of town, but it was just yesterday that we heard about Vicky Funk passing away, obviously Terry's wife. And gosh, I can't even remember the first time I met Vicky, but it had to be 25 or 30 years ago. I'm pretty sure that she was at least a few of the WCW events, but then she came to Smoky Mountain and visited a couple times when Terry came up. But the most recent time, she came up with Terry for when he did that. Remember the Ring of Honor shot at the Hammerstein Ballroom where he was the special referee for the world title match in 2010-ish.
Oh, yeah, I remember, because I had to get my cousin to go find him in the middle of Manhattan, remember?
Yeah. Well, and that was part of the deal because, coming all the way from Amarillo, Terry did not need to do that for the money. He did it partially for love of the game, and he gave a great speech to the guys in the locker room that night. But also the way I kind of sold it to him was I called him. I said that Kerry Silken was wanting to fly you and Vicky up for a weekend in New York, and he can get you tickets for a Broadway play and everything. Well, Corny, that would be great. So that's why we kind of got him into it that way. But Vicky was just had a ton of fun that weekend. She had a ball. She was just always smiling most of the time. I still the wrestling business, but I really didn't know her that well, but would see her obviously intermittently whenever we were around Terry, and she was a great lady. And so we obviously sent our sympathies to Terry and the rest of the family, but that's, that just came out of the blue. And So we want to make sure we mention that before we go too far here on the program, although we always go too far here on the program. And today, now, let's give them the schedule for the upcoming week so that they don't freak out, because I'm about to go out of my mind with, I feel like I should have got an apartment in Chicago this month and just had some place to stay. I've been up there so often, and now I'm fixed to leave for the folks coming up this weekend, the big weekend in the Big Apple. I will be participating in that for MLW on Thursday and Friday at the Melrose Ballroom and wherever the hell Long Island City is. And you just gave me a goddamn geography tour of Manhattan and New Jersey and New York and all this stuff. I don't know where the fuck I'm going, but the point is I'll be there at the events and we'll be available for the VIP, or not. I don't even know it's a VIP. I think it's just a meet and greet. I'll be able to meet you and greet you. Get there early for a limited amount of time because I got about 18 other jobs. I can pop the corn too this weekend, Court. Thank you. But anyway, part of my deal though is that because they say, "Oh, Cornette, you're going to New York." Well, April 15th is right around the corner. You know, what can I say? It's a very great financial remuneration here to do this, but also part of my deal. I love the MLW matches. I love calling the matches. I don't love the location I'm going to be calling them in because it, to me, is the 7th level of like Dante's Inferno somewhere. So my deal is I'm going as far as Secaucus. I've already figured out the back, so I don't even have to touch the New Jersey Turnpike or the Garden State Park. I'm going to take the back way into Secaucus and stop there and park my vehicle, Black Beauty. And they are sending a car service to ferry me over those bridges and tunnels into that chaos that I refuse to drive in and risk my life in. They're going to ferry me over there. People who know how to drive and what they're fucking doing and where they're going. So I will not miss anything. You will not hear of me being carjacked on the corner of 45th Street and fucking Broadway, if that is indeed a thing or whatever. So we're doing the show today, which airs tomorrow. That's a lot of help for people who are listening to this on Wednesday. They don't know what the and then there's going to be no Jim Cornette experience this week, Thursday, the 4th of April. There's going to be no Jim Cornette experience because I'm going to be in New York. And also because what we're doing is when I get back here to my luxurious castle on Sunday afternoon is the plan. It's about 700 miles back, so I'm going to split it up a little bit. I'm going to sit down to congratulate myself for coming home and watch WrestleMania. And then we're going to record the program on Monday morning and get that up as quickly as we can to the folks that are so inclined to listen to it. So that's what the schedule is. And then we're also going to have a drive-through next Monday also because we're recording one ahead of time. So we're trying not to miss anything. Have I missed anything about us not missing anything with the programming?
I think you've covered everything. And also remember, all the episodes will be on YouTube at tinyurl.com/officialcornyyoutube.
That's right, they will. So if you miss them or you can't get to them or whatever, you can YouTube them at your leisure. Since we like YouTube again right now.
Do you prefer leisure or leisure?
Well, I think unless you're fucking Rex Harrison, it's probably leisure's good enough. You know, or fucking Stewie Griffin or Rex Harrison, one or the other. And leisure is fine. You know what I'd like to do? I'd like to leisurely mention that we're going to see our good friend Stephen P. New coming up here shortly also. Yeah. He will be in the Big Apple for WrestleMania weekend with a couple of his clients on a big case there. I think it's something to do with the CIA and Mueller. I don't know. But anyway, but also he's going to be in Madison, West Virginia on April 13th as part of the big festivities when the Midnight Express and I are inducted in the All-Star Wrestling Hall of Fame. And if you don't know where Madison is, it's right outside of Charleston. It's the beautiful Madison Civic Center it's almost suburban Charleston. It's pretty suburban. Everything in West Virginia is suburban. But the Midnight and I are going to be there, and also Stephen P. New will be there to give proclamations to Bobby Fulton and Tracy Smothers and West Virginia's own Brian Logan on their contributions to pro wrestling and in behalf of all the fans of the state of West Virginia. That's because Stephen P. New is a guy that does a lot of things on behalf of people. He fights for your rights. He gets you judgments. He fights back against big corporations that have downtrodden you and put you under their thumb, like a purring dog who's once had its day, or whatever the fuck. Stephen, what are you talking? Don't laugh while I'm doing the plug here, because Stephen P. New does all this stuff. And he manages to keep up on his pro wrestling at the same time. And did you see in the news here recently, another one of these big pharmaceutical corporations paid out millions and gajillions because they were basically hiding the fact that OxyContin, when they first introduced it, could be like majorly addictive and fuck your entire life up. They were glossing that over, shoving that under the rug, so to speak. And they got caught. And all these big companies, all the Donald Trump's billionaire boys club buddies, they're all fucking us in some way or another. So if you have been screwed around by a big corporation, whether it's big pharma or big oil or big motor or big anything, the big companies that fuck the little guy over are bowing down. And one of the people they're bowing down to is Stephen P. New and the newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084, because he fights for the rights of every man and woman. If you need to sue, call Stephen P. New. And don't forget, if anyone in your family has been born addicted to opioids because of the opioid crisis, especially in West Virginia, but across the country, whether it's your children, nieces and nephews, grandparents especially, etc., who may be a little more responsible in trying to take care of these things. That's what Stephen's working on right now for the people who can't speak for themselves, the opioid addicted born babies, which is about as fucked up as you can do to somebody. So that's who he's trying to get even for right now. Once again, what's that number, Brian?
888-692-8084. Is that it?
I'll let you decide when you edit the program whether you leave in the doubt you had in your mind for a number that we have been repeating over and over for the past 2 years or whatever the fuck. Stephen's going to take care of everything. Stephen will take care of you. Call Stephen P. New. It'll be you'll be the last co-host I have named last. One way or the other.
There we go.
All right. What are we doing here today?
That's what I'd like to know. But what we're going to be doing is answering the listeners' questions, and they've sent them in, and I already told you how and where, and we'll just get right to them. And we had a few questions about you at WrestleMania, so let me ask at least one of them. This one was sent in via email to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Daniel C. Hi, Jim. WrestleMania 10, Lex Luger versus Yokozuna. Bret Hart versus Yokozuna. What the fuck were you wearing?
Do you speak in complete sentences, Daniel, when you just blurt things out? And what the fuck was I wearing?
And we've gotten a few questions about your outfit. I don't know what has prompted these questions about your outfit at WrestleMania, but people want to know why you were wearing what you were wearing.
Well, I have some insight into why people have been asked the question, because since it's WrestleMania season, people have been tweeting pictures of things at previous WrestleManias and clips and GIFs and GIFs and all that type of thing. And several of them featured my WrestleMania 10 outfit that I wore. And one of them, even when Roddy Piper punched me and I took the big bump, I was farting through silk there to take a bump for Roddy Piper. But anyway, and what do you remember? It was the kind of the gold and black Sgt. Pepperish. That you remember that, don't you, Brian? You
wore it at the Night of Legends also.
Well, there you go. See, you remember it I wore it in the main event of WrestleMania 10, and you remember it from a Smoky Mountain Wrestling show. So there, good for you, actually. That tells me that you're my kind of guy. But anyway, so that's why everybody's been asking about it. It was a jacket that when I was in Atlanta, one weekend, I think it was probably a Smoky Mountain Wrestling Cobb Civic Center event, and I was in Little 5 Points, which is kind of like what do they call them? The Bohemian area of Atlanta, or was 25 years ago. And because they have cool bookstores and thrift shops and old clothing stand, whatever the fuck. And I go in there and I see this thing for $25. It was a little snug, but I made it work. It was this giant black, like ringmaster's tuxedo type of thing, but with these epaulets on the shoulders and the gold sequin trim and a fucking like a cowl behind it. And I said, fuck, I got to be able to do something with that.
$25?
$25. And when I found out, this had been a few months before that, as I recall. So when I found out that the matches for WrestleMania, I said, WrestleMania, I'll wear it. It'll be perfect. And I had the WWF seamstress, her name was Terry, make pants out of the gold sequin material that matched the trim on the jacket. And I think that was like $100 for, a custom made set of pants. And so my WrestleMania outfit cost $125, and people are still asking about it 25 years later. And it hangs in a position of honor on my office wall right over my head right now. And I had a matching gold lame tennis racket cover also. So, and that was, I think, like $20.
Did you ever wear it again after the Night of Legends?
I don't think so. Because, I mean, it was not the most comfortable thing, but besides that, once you established it, WrestleMania and a Night of Legends, why, where else can you go?
When you did the Night of Legends, you obviously wore the outfit, which was a lot more glamorous than your typical outfit. And Tammy also got really dressed up in a nice gown. Did you tell her to get something special for that night, or is that something she did on her own?
Oh, no, she did it on her own because she was with it right from the start, and she could tell, perk up for the big shows. And, you didn't need to tell her anything. She already got it.
All right, well.
But anyway, after that, because then, and actually, in Ring of Honor and OVW, I was an announcer, an official. There was never an occasion for me to wear something that grandiose, let's say again. And also because it was 25 years ago today, Sgt. Pepper told the band to play. I couldn't, I was afraid I'd start rumors that I was buried next to the real Paul McCartney.
This one was emailed in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Jerry R. in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's a follow-up question about your loaded boot answer previously.
Oh, I was about to say about my loaded boot.
I recently listened to episode 89 of the Drive-Thru featuring a bit of history on the classic loaded boot angle. My question concerns the Midnight Express match from Capital Combat 90. Stan Lane obviously loads his boot, tapping his toe on the mat several times before delivering a kick to Tom Zink, who is then rolled up for the pin by Bobby Eaton. Jim Ross and Bob Caudle make no mention of Stan's dirty deed. It always seemed a little strange to me. Were the announcers instructed to ignore this, or was it some sort of slight against Tom Zink? The match remains one of my favorites, as well as the one from the U.S. Tag Title Tournament earlier in the year. Jim, I have heard you tell the story about the Phantom Angle from Altoona and how Jim Herd screwed it up. Do you have any other stories about working with Pillman and Zink?
Okay, well,
there's a lot there.
Yeah. Yes, there's a lot to unpack here. And actually, to start off with, Stan did not load his boot. Stan just on the fly, because that was when, as I recall, May of 90, Capital Combat, right?
That's right. It was the last thing with the Road Warriors, yeah.
How do I remember these things? I don't know, ladies and gentlemen. But anyway, that was when Ole had come along and was trying to go back to credibility and simple stuff on the finishes and rein things in all the wrong places that they shouldn't have been reined in while not reining in the right. But anyway, and he wanted just a simple heel fuck where Stan, as I recall, would kick the fucking, who was it, Zink?
Zink
in the back of the head, and it'd be a little fuck from behind while he was busy with Bobby or whatever. And Stan just on the fly, he wasn't really loading his boot. He was just, as he was coming up behind, he didn't want people, he wanted to put some emphasis in this because it wasn't like we're hitting somebody with the loaded racket. It was, it wasn't a bit. So he just tapped his foot a couple times to kind of get people just watching for his foot. And then he does the big kick. And, and it was just a little something to put some emphasis on it. The boot was never meant to be loaded. That was just Ole's 1960s finish.
And what about memories of working with Pillman and Zink?
Well, that's all we have are memories because they erased most of the tapes. No. I've told this story before. I don't know how many new listeners we got, but they aired the match that we did on the WCW Saturday Night Show in Altoona at the Jaffa Mosque, where they gave Brian Pillman the Veg-O-Matic while my tennis racket, I'd put it over his throat, and then Bobby comes down with the leg drop, boom, and that had been intended to start an entire angle that Pillman's throat had been injured and reveal his throat surgeries and his childhood struggles and the whole 9 yards to give the babyface, obstacles to overcome. And I went into detail on it on one of the programs, which is a good reason to go to YouTube and always listen to our program so you don't miss these things. But basically, Herd didn't like the Midnight Express doing anything, and Barnett was trying to take Pillman under his wing at that point, which I don't know ever actually fully happened. I don't mean it that way. I mean, he wanted Pillman to be a main event guy, he didn't. But he was trying to make Herd happy by saying, well, because he said it will make Brian look weak. And I said, how when he comes back and comes through all this and beats all of us, we should do it with main event guys or top guys. And I was like, okay, you old prick. That's why I never liked Barnett after that. So they ixnayed the interviews that he had done and the things that we mentioned, the throat injury, and just had had stolen the belts, and that became the bone of contention. And it was flat after that. But we loved anyway, to answer the question, working house show matches with Brian. Tom was a nice guy and he was there, but Brian was the star of the show in our opinion, and also the guy that Bobby Stan both most liked to be in the ring with. Brian was he was ahead of his experience level at that point. He'd only been working a couple of years, but he had the poise, he got it. Plus he looked so good. When you got heat on him, the girls would cry. And he was always in shape, and he was fun in the locker room. And that's when he was, he was good crazy before he went crazy with the gimmick. He was always still, he just fit right in. He fit right in with a locker room with guys like the Horseman and Dusty and all of those fucking guys. He was a great personality.
Barnett was really behind him there. What about like at Halloween Havoc 89 when he got the U.S. title shot against Luger, a match I really liked at the time, and I didn't see him as being anything other than a valid contender, even though he was kind of new there and he was much smaller than Luger. But who was responsible for that? Was that Flair? Was that Barnett's influence there? Halloween Havoc 89.
Halloween Havoc 89 that would have been Flair also, because Flair took over in August or September of 89 and didn't quit till the end of February. So yeah, that was Flair, because, well, that's why a lot of people don't remember that the week before Flair quit as Booker, the two shows that he had most recently done, the Saturday night TBS show and a Sunday night main event TBS show, 6:05 p.m. each night respectively. The Saturday night show main event was Flair against Pillman in a single match that Flair specifically wanted to work with Pillman and showcase him, and that did a 4.0 rating, was the highest Saturday night in like fucking 5 years at that point. And the Sunday night show was Ric Flair and Arn Anderson against the Rock and Roll Express from Beaumont, Texas, and that did a 4.4, which was the highest rated Sunday in like 3 years. And at that point, Flair said, fuck you, basically, Jim Herd. I reprinted the resignation letter in the Midnight Express scrapbook. You won't leave me alone. You haven't given me the control you promised me. I've still produced all this for you. So basically, he was saying, you think you can find somebody to do it better? Have at it. I'm out of here. And he resigned as Booker, and they never got those numbers again. On Saturday or Sunday ever, they had to start Nitro, and I don't think they ever got him on Thunder. They had to start Nitro 6 years later to get him.
Who was pushing for Ole to be the booker? I mean, he had screwed over Barnett years earlier. Was it Barnett saying Ole's your guy?
Well, by that time I'd quit, because I quit about 3 weeks after Flair quit. Remember when I told JR to go tell Herd that if I showed up at the booking meeting the following day, I was going to stick my 2 knuckles deep in his eye sockets. That's when he ixnayed the deal for the Midnight Express to fill the other 2 horsemen spot that we had all agreed on with Flair and Arn and myself and etc., so that we could field a 4 horseman combination, since Herd had screwed Tully Blanchard out of a career by reneging on his offer to come in. So then he went back on that, and I quit the booking committee. That was sometime in March, early March, and they went to a committee until I think Ole got named sometime around the first part of May. And I don't know otherwise than maybe it was like nobody else would take the fucking thing at that point. And I don't even know if Ole really wanted it. He didn't, and what he kept it. How long was he? Was it 6 months? Maybe
a little. No,
bit wait. Well, a little bit longer.
Starcade.
Yeah, and we quit at Halloween, so he lasted all the way till what's following January or February, and then they flip flopped it again.
Yeah, then Dusty came back. That was when Dusty.
That's
came
right.
Back.
And then Dusty called me that time. But anyway, nevertheless.
Obviously, Barnett was a very successful promoter in various places from Australia to Georgia and everywhere else. And there's a lot of rumors whether or not he actually was wealthy. You know, Vern Gagne apparently always thought it was a show, and Ole Anderson always thought it was a show. And lots of other people say, oh, he was filthy rich. But
actually, it was a little bit of a combination. At some point, he was at some points he was very well off. At other points, he projected that aura. But he was certainly well off by wrestling standards most of the time, but he wasn't a multi-millionaire, that one would think. But he lived like one, which I guess is the key to the whole thing.
Obviously, your interactions with him were never positive from 88 on, when you first met him at the Nassau Coliseum or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But from the little bit you gleaned from being around him when he was maybe saying things to appease the people paying him, and the little bits that you know from people that were around him, was Jim Barnett known to be very smart for the wrestling business in terms of what would work, or did he completely rely on a booker and he really wouldn't know what worked and what didn't work? What would you say?
No, I think from the 50s and 60s and 70s, when he was, in it and on top of his game and doing all those revolutionary things, and was, he was one of the 2 or 3 guys, along with Sam Muchnick and, maybe a 1 or 2, Vince Sr. maybe, and a 1 or 2 other guys that knew almost everything that happened for 50 years in the wrestling business inside, that the boys and some of the other promoters didn't even know. He was a smart guy politically. I think he was smart wrestling wise, but what he was by the time that they were using him as a consultant for WCW that's when he was living in, I don't know whether it was a luxurious penthouse, but it was still a penthouse apartment of some kind downtown Atlanta. He wasn't going to get a job back with Vince. There was nobody else that could pay him the money in wrestling that he was used to making, or that WCW could pay him. And I don't think he was going to rock Jim Herd's boat. I think he was going to, say what he thought if there was no detriment to him. But if Jim Herd wanted something, he wasn't going to die on a hill, and because he was going to keep that spot, I think, at that point in his life. And, so he really wasn't contributing anything, because you couldn't really contribute anything and still agree with the fucking guy, because nobody else in the room was agreeing with him. And Jodi Hamilton would nod every once in a while. Oh, yeah. But,
Was Jodi Hamilton in the meetings when you guys had the booking committee?
Yes. And Jodi had, once again, had been a major star for a long period of time and had been promoting, etc. But the responsibilities they gave him at that point were, make sure the rings get there and book the job guys. And that's pretty much what, Jodi was doing at that point.
And that's how we got Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker.
And that is correct. You are correct. But When you had a room with, and Jim Ross was in the booking meetings also and did contribute things, ideas, and etc. But he got sideways with Flair because since JR was working in the office in CNN Center, whereas we were on the road, and JR would just come to TVs when we'd write TV and send it in, and Herd would pull all the live interviews out of it and put in 30-second pre-tapes, and have JR turn the paperwork in. Then Rick would ask Janie in the office, well, who changed it? Well, JR gave me, all right. So then JR's changing his, it was maddening. But in the room with Jim Herd, Jim Barnett, Jim Ross, Jim Cornette, Kevin Sullivan, Ric Flair, Jodi Hamilton, did I leave anybody out? Most of it, and then Terry later on, Terry Funk, but most of the time it was those guys. The only people really contributing anything to the booking or the television writing were myself, Kevin, Flair, and JR. Kevin and I and Flair worked together, and then JR would contribute things that we would actually use, but not if they were Herd's changes, because Flair would have me keep our original format. So when we got to TV and he saw what Herd had changed, he would have me change it back. It was just fucking ludicrous. And otherwise, everybody else was just sitting there taking up time. And that's why nothing ever got done in the booking meetings. We wrote all the TVs and figured everything out, all the cards, everything, either in the car, on the way to shows, or in the locker room at shows, or occasionally in a hotel room on the road. And then I would take everything home because I had the best handwriting and write it all out and fax it in the office. In booking meetings, the only thing that got done was Herd complaining about everything and then everybody fucking getting mad at Herd.
You've talked in the past here on the show about a couple incidents. One where Paul Heyman got very upset and I guess had a fight with a garbage can in the hallway. And then later portrayed it like he threw the garbage can at Ric Flair or whatever it was. Yeah,
yes. Yeah, well, no, he did. He threw it at where Flair had been standing 45 seconds earlier before he walked out of the room and closed the door.
Okay, so there's some truth to that.
So he did throw it at Ric Flair's aura.
And then you've talked about the Eddie Gilbert incident where he had been on the committee in the spring and summer of '89, and then did he change a finish in Memphis? Was that what it was? Was it him against Ron Simmons?
Well, that was he and Flair, I guess, didn't see eye to eye to begin with. And Eddie was part of the committee along with JR and all the other people that I mentioned that took over from George Scott in April of '89. And basically after they shot the angle with Flair and Funk after the Steamboat match in Nashville at Wrestle War in May, Flair was trying to do everything he could to save the company because he saw the house shows and he saw the fucking TV ratings and everything was going down. And he basically gave him an ultimatum and said, I want the book. And he wanted to be the book rather than a committee where nobody was really in charge. And Herd was in charge, technically, because he was the boss of the company. Flair wanted to be the booker and have a committee that worked for him, which was what should have been done. And most people that knew anything about wrestling were all in favor of that because you can't just have a group of people. Anyway, Eddie was already on the committee. Eddie was very creative, but Eddie had the Tennessee style. Flair was not as creative as Eddie, but he had the Carolina style that this was the lineage of. He had much more experience, obviously, in big money matches, and he's the fucking star of the show now that Dusty's gone. And we need to build this thing around what he wants to present, which over the next 9 months, pretty much came to pass that all the TV ratings went up. Flair in the main events drew all the pay-per-views came up. Some of the houses came up, not many of them, but, you can't work miracles, and there wasn't enough time, but he got business back to where people were watching on television. Obviously, he ended up doubling George Scott's TV numbers from April through to the following January and February. The pay-per-view by the Clash of Champions especially I think he did 2 of the 3 biggest at that point in time that they had aired. So anyway, Flair and Eddie never saw eye to eye. And then finally, Eddie was working with Ron Simmons in Memphis, and the finish put Ron Simmons over because Flair's thinking this big fucking hoss, Florida State football great. I'm going to, this guy needs to fucking be pushed. And Eddie took it as an offense because it was in Memphis. And that's what Eddie's soft spot was. He had a soft spot for Memphis. So he changed it and did something else, and Flair heard about it because he called me at home and vented at me that Eddie Gilbert has changed his finish and he went over Ron Simmons or whatever he was fucking saying. He said, "Are you interested in being on the committee if a spot opens up?" And I said, "Yes, obviously, Rick. Thank you. Just let me know, what you do." And a couple weeks later, a spot opened up and I was on the committee. And the story went out that Eddie showed up at a meeting one day and I was sitting in his chair. And that's not for whether we didn't have assigned seating. I tried to get as far away from Hurt as possible, but it wasn't always successful. And Eddie was told not to come, and that whole thing happened before I ever showed up. So I don't want it to come off like that suddenly I was there, because that's the story that went out.
What happens after that is what I'm curious about. So Eddie's still there for a long time after he gets removed from the booking committee. Is that a difficult thing? Because obviously he had hurt feelings. It's something he complained about for a long time. I don't know what his paranoia was like then, but obviously years later, a lot of people say that knew him, that he did have some issues with paranoia. But was it difficult to keep someone like Eddie around after removing him from the booking committee?
Well, not with Dusty, yes, because Dusty had been the guy for so long. With Eddie, he was still dedicated. He also still knew that it was a constricting wrestling market, and he had a good deal there financially. He was a professional. He liked working. He still thought he could get over as a talent on TV, so he wasn't going to just up and go, because if he did it sometimes in Memphis when he was removed as the booker, but he was one of the bookers. So I can see that it hurt his feelings, but he still, I still talked to him and got along with him at that point. I'm not saying at that point, like later on we didn't, but there was never a time we didn't get along. Sometimes he'd just go away and I wouldn't see him again for a while suddenly. But I think he was probably trying to stick it out and see if there wouldn't be an opportunity at some point as long as he could. And so it wasn't really that hard, but at the same time, also he knew that he was doomed to be at some level because Flair didn't want to feature him.
Were there still hurt feelings at this period of time, 1989, 1990, between Flair and Dusty? Obviously, Dusty's long gone. He's in the WWF. Tell me about when you first saw him in the polka dots. I want to know everyone's reaction to that. But were there still hurt feelings from the last couple of years of Jim Crockett Promotions and how everything went down? And a lot of people in the Flair camp had problems with Dusty at the end. Were there still hurt feelings then?
In the locker room, probably on some people's part, but not. The thing about this, I'm usually riding with Rick and Kevin Sullivan, and I don't remember Rick bringing up Dusty in any derogatory way ever, really, in a conversation. I mean, occasionally a story would come up about, me and Dusty and, Philadelphia, the big house, whatever, but not in a derogatory way. And Kevin, he worked with Dusty for a long time, and Dusty gave me a break. So it's not like we're sitting there savaging him in the car. But some of the guys in the locker room may have been still giggling behind his back at the polka dot thing. I couldn't fucking believe it when I saw it, but at the same time, I wasn't surprised by it because, it was so embarrassing to what Dusty actually had been. And, it's one of those things. It's one of those things that Bruce Pritchard would have fucking taken up for. Like, the Red Rooster was a good thing, too. Well, we need to, give Dusty personality, right? So like that needs to happen.
So they did all these vignettes with him, like as a garbage man and cleaning shit out of a toilet. Yeah. That was I was 9 years old getting into it. I'm like, this is kind of weird. But then he debuts and he was Dusty. Came out in a tie-dyed shirt, DR on his black tights, and he was Dusty Rhodes. And then all of a sudden they put the polka dots on him. You would think I was the target audience, 9 years old, into wrestling, and I thought that was stupid. So
well, it because they were even at that point, they were targeting people that weren't into wrestling, obviously. And it was just, but I don't remember anybody getting together in the locker room and laughing about it. But I'm sure some people got what was Magnum TA said one time on Mid-South TV after we tarred and feathered him. I'm sure some of you out there will find this remotely humorous. But it was just embarrassing to do, but that's, I don't know. That's what Vince always wanted to fucking do. Instead of making something serious and dramatic and powerful, and he wanted to make shit goofy and silly.
I think Wyndham returned in May of 90. So that's right around this period of time where everything changes. Who made the call to bring Barry Windham back? Was it you guys on the committee with Flair, or was it Ole?
Well, if it was May, it was probably Ole. Because, one thing that everybody could agree on at that time was that Barry Windham was a great talent, and that was kind of like his home. The NWA, the offshoots of Crockett, etc., and he fit there. So, it's not like that would be a revolutionary fucking groundbreaking idea, bringing Barry Windham. He was, from 86 to 88 or 89, he may have been the best guy in the business in the ring overall.
We have some questions here, Jim, that kind of follow up on things we just talked about, so I'll ask these. This was emailed in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Steve. I was wondering if Jim could explain the decision to have the Black Scorpion on Smoky Mountain Wrestling Episode 1 and the story behind Jeff Farmer using the gimmick.
Well, who the fuck was Jeff Farmer?
Jeff Farmer was the fake Sting.
Oh, that's right. I knew I'd heard that name before, but
Thunder and Lightning.
No, that's right. Well, the reason why the Black Scorpion was on the first episode of Smoky Mountain Wrestling is because he was a mass job guy that we fucking beat. It was just because we did that in October of 91, and it 9 months before whatever they'd finally done that, whatever the fuck they did with the Black Scorpion. And we were just given, a fucking jab to stupid WCW shit. But I don't know anything about Jeff Farmer. I don't know that I ever met him.
All right. A great answer
why would I know something about Jeff Farmer?
I don't know. I'm guessing maybe he was the Black Scorpion somewhere. I don't even know, actually, what the answer to that is.
No, our Black Scorpion, I think, was old Carl Stiles from fucking Murphy, North Carolina. He was the guy seriously, and then Dutch liked him, so we brought him back and used him as a flunky. And I used him as a flunky on the air where he would be like, remember in the early episodes, Dutch's flunky was Carl Stiles.
That's right.
And what we were doing was he had a fucking glass eye, and they had done an angle in Continental where they pulled his glass eye out and stomped it right there on television in front of God and everybody. And I wanted to do that so bad. And we started using Carl because he was right there from Murphy. But then I think he got some kind of spot to go to Puerto Rico, or he went away somewhere and he wasn't available anymore. And so I don't think we ever did pull Carl Stiles' eye out.
So not only did Dutch leave you to go to Puerto Rico, his flunky left you to go to Puerto Rico.
Well, I don't even know if something happened, and I'm not trying to insinuate he went to jail. I can't remember, but something happened where Carl went somewhere and he couldn't make the shows anymore. That's all I remember. So there is a level of PTSD in that time period.
Our next question was emailed in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Anthony Best in Ashland, Kentucky. I was recently watching some old Undertaker matches, and I came across one that ended with you being out in an actual body bag. How did this come to be, and how in the world did Vince talk you into it?
Actually, it didn't take that much talking into. No, the way it came to be was they were kind of ribbing me a little bit, but that was when I had been an on-air manager as well as working on the creative team, and they were changing. So that's when Paul Bearer took over, I think, with Vader. Anyway, it was the end of 96, first of 97. I was going to transition to just working in the office, an agent at TVs, et cetera, et cetera. So I can't even remember who I managed. I remember the spot because that's the only time I got tombstoned by Undertaker. I thought that was cool. I've taken The Undertaker's tombstone have been figure four'd by Ric Flair, bionic elbowed by Dusty Rhodes, pile driven by Jerry Lawler. You know, the goddamn collection. Chopped by Ricky Steamboat. But
did you ever take the Oklahoma Stampede from Watts during the last Stampede?
Fuck you, no. Don't bring it up now. But here's the thing. Watts would have said only if I was leaving the territory, because if he Oklahoma Stampeded me and I was walking around the next week, it would have killed his fucking moves. So I was safe from shit like that. And that's how I learned how not to take things I didn't want to take.
Did you take the thump?
No.
From JYD? No, wow.
It was never called for. Hacksaw Duggan slammed me a couple times on spot shows and speared me. The Rock and Roll double drop kicked me. But, you know, once again, I think that would have been the key thing that saved me there, was it would have exposed the move. Anyway, where was I going with this?
What was the Undertaker body bag?
Oh, the Undertaker body bag. So I just real quick in the locker room, I said, just, you know, make sure, because I was heavy at that point, right? And I'm not saying Mark couldn't get me up, but I said, make sure you bend over low, because he's so tall. I wanted him to get under my center of gravity so he didn't lose my big bliffed ass, right? So he picked me up in the locker room, and I can go up pretty light on a slam, or I could at that point. So anyway, they did it, boom, and they put me in a body bag, boom, and they're carrying me out. But that's where the rib came in afterwards, when they got me to the back at the gorilla position. Now, that is a vinyl bag, and when it's zipped all the way up, especially when I'm blowed up anyway, working the match, hot TV lights, I'm ready to get out of that bag, and then there's fucking Brother Brucey fiddling. Oh, the zipper's stuck. I'm like, motherfucker, that zipper better come unstuck. I'm going to get out of this thing eventually. And, you know, from inside this fucking body bag where everybody's, you know, giggling and everything. And then they unzipped me and got me some fucking air. But that was an honor to be tombstoned by the Taker.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Robert Preston. I'm inquiring to the locker room reaction to Bret Hart and Lex Luger co-winning the 1994 WWF Royal Rumble. Who pitched the idea and who was against it or for it?
And that was, I was not on the creative team at that point. I was just doing my guest starring, managing and television work at TV and pay-per-view. So I don't know who was pitching it, but obviously Vince was behind it, because that was still at the point where Luger had wrestled Yokozuna Summerslam 93, and they did the count out, and then the balloons dropped from the ceiling, and Luger celebrates like a fucking
ridiculous,
just an igmo, because every fan knew he didn't win the title, and because he had to portray it like he didn't know that, it made him look like an idiot. I don't think he recovered from that. And to be honest, as the folks from WCW knew, Luger always got over as one of the guys, top guys, but not the guy. And Vince was convinced that they were going to stretch it out till following WrestleMania. But I think by January, potentially, I guess he was hedging his bets. I don't know. He's like, do we want to do this or not at this point? Because Lex was less over, partially because of the fucking SummerSlam. And so he left himself an out with Bret Hart there. And that's, you know, the way that it went. I don't.
Locker room reaction, though. The first part of the question was.
I don't know. I was out at the goddamn. No, I wasn't. I was out at the ring when Bret wrestled Yokozuna. But fuck, I don't remember. I didn't. Here's the thing. I'm going up there for TVs and pay-per-views from Smoky Mountain Wrestling, where I'm not sleeping, you know, on a 24-hour-a-day basis. I didn't give a fuck who won the Royal Rumble or how the fuck it was done. I was right at that point going up to manage the Heavenly Bodies, do the best I could with Yokozuna, and get me a check, pay off my Smoky Mountain Wrestling losses. So that time period, except if I was directly involved in it, memories are hazy. I hate to sound like all these people say I don't remember, but on shit like that, I didn't give a fuck when it happened. Just being honest.
Let's see if you remember this one. Our next question was emailed in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Brandon Folsom. Why was the great Muta jobbed out at Starrcade 89 after going all year unpinned?
I remember this one.
Was Muta upset about losing 3 straight? Because he doesn't sell Flair's figure 4 at all. He stares at the ref while Sting pins him, and then blows mist in Luger's face, waves his hand at the crowd, and just walks out.
Yeah, but that was the night where Great Muta decided he was going back to Japan.
I realized someone had to lose in that situation, but why blow Muta's streak like that? Wouldn't it have been a better idea to save that for another night to help someone really get over? As a fan of Muta, I remember watching it thinking he's a shoo-in to win or go to the finals, and then he just gets jobbed. What sense did this make?
Well, none. They wanted a concept for pay-per-view. And I was on a creative team, right? But this was out of our hands. We were told, I remember this, by Jim Herd, through those dick-sucking lips of his, that Starrcade, it was going to be, Night of the Iron Man, they started out calling it that, but then they got some goddamn trademark infringement thing, so they were trying to establish a concept for a pay-per-view. And they were sold somehow. He was sold on that. And that's what we were given. Okay, now you guys work it out. And obviously they never did it again. Not only because the trademark infringement of Night of the Iron Man from whatever the fuck, but also because it fucking... I'm an anal, even then, an anal retentive writer downer and you know, results and statistics and cards and etc. And as soon as I heard this, I'm like, wait a minute. You have the 4 top singles guys in the company and the 4 top tag teams. Somebody is going to have to get the shit beat out of them in each of those divisions. And who is it going to be? And fucking it for the tag team division, did it end up being Doom? Right? They got beat fucking.
Or the Samoans, maybe.
Was it the Doom or it was the Samoans? Wait, who was in the goddamn thing?
Road Warriors, Steiners, I think Doom and the Samoans.
Was it the? Yeah, look up those results because I'm pretty sure it was. But anyway, the point is, I said Starrcade has always been about the big main event world championship match, long-awaited match, and grudge matches and stipulations and blow-offs, the big show. You can't just go in and advertise not only just these teams without even being able to advertise the full card, but also who the Road Warriors going to do a job, much less multiple jobs in one night. Fucking the world champion, Ric Flair, the Sting. What the fuck? How are you going to work this?
You were right. It was Doom.
Thank you. So they killed Doom and I said, at least put the Midnight Express in it. We'll do 3 jobs in the same night, and all 3 of the matches will be good, and it won't hurt us. But Herd wouldn't do that because he would have had to admit that the Midnight Express was one of the top 4 teams. So instead, and it was Flair, Sting, Luger, and Muta, right?
Yes.
Okay. Going by contracts, Muta was the flunky. And then the tag teams, the Steiners, who were heavily figured in, the Road Warriors, who wasn't going to do no jobs for nobody, and they'd be leaving fucking 4 months later. So the point is, Muta, that's pretty much what soured him on America. He was here for a while after that, but he didn't like it worth a shit. Gary Hart didn't like it worth a shit, but Muta was the guy that was not making $500,000 a year. And fucking Doom were the team that were making probably less than everybody except maybe the Samoans, but the Samoans were working like Road Warriors too.
It wasn't even a Samoan SWAT team. It's Fatu and the Samoan Savage.
Well, that's because the Samu, I think, got hurt or whatever the fuck. But the point is, so by the nature of it, a round robin thing, those guys got shit kicked out of them. It was a fuck. And I called the tag team matches with JR, and Funk called the singles matches with JR. So we had rotate. That was the only good thing about it. That was a nice little touch to rotate the commentators. But otherwise than that, it fucking blew. And that was Jim Herd's example of either bowing to pressure from somebody in Turner who thought of it or coming up with it himself, because that's what we were force-fed. And I immediately identified what was going to be wrong with it, and son of a gun, wouldn't you know who won the pony?
Was there any talk on the committee about turning Muta babyface?
Yes, and I heard at that point, Flair told me that Gary was against it, Gary Hart, because Gary would have lost his guy, and they were figured in quite highly. And at least Flair thought that Gary was talking Muta out of switching babyface, saying it would bury him. When, as a matter of fact, that was time for that to happen shortly after that. But not after he got beat 3 times in one night, but the kids were starting to like him, and people were starting to like him because he was cool anyway. He could have split off and been a big baby face and done comic books or whatever the fuck, and actually not even had to change his gimmick, and it would have worked. But after they beat him 3 times in one night, he wasn't going to fucking stick around or do anything more than what he had to for those people anyway. I don't blame him.
You had a few heels there at that time that the fans started cheering just because of the way they came off. Sid became very popular from doing nothing but like posing for the fans after he did a power move. But yeah. Muta was spectacular. Is there any thought when you have a wrestler like that, and he has a spectacular move like the moonsault, which could look devastating, but also there's no way you could do something like that, especially that period of time, and not get a pop, of saying, don't do that, because that's going to make you a babyface?
Well, they might have had they known at the start, but once he started doing it and got it over, there wasn't any point in him stopping doing it. And like I said, actually, there was interest in switching him, but he didn't want to. So I think at that point, maybe both sides may have given up. What did Muta do in 90?
He left by February, remember?
I was about, well, there you go. Yeah. I was about to say, at that point, it's like, fuck it.
The last thing he did, I think, was they had the Johnson City match, and then they had the cage match on the Clash where Sting got hurt, where it was Muta, the Dragon Master, and Buzz Sawyer versus Ole, Arn, and Flair. And by that period of time, the fans were totally behind Muta. Obviously, the Horsemen had just turned heel, but they were totally behind Muta and just buying everything he was selling.
Yeah, and then he went home.
And then he went home. And the most disappointing thing, if you were a fan of Muta in 89 and obviously early 90, whenever he came back to WCW after that, 92, 94, whatever it was, he was never that great again. He was always a lot slower. He lost the edge. He was never, he was one of those guys you always said, I wish he came back. I wish he came back. And then he would come back and it was like, oof, this is not what I remember. At least that was my impression.
He did have injuries and bad knees, and I think he got a little bit heavier, but was he better in Japan than he was at the same time in WCW, or had he slowed down in both places?
He had slowed down in both places, but he was still better in Japan just based on the matches and who he was working with.
Yeah, I think he's one, and I don't blame him. He was one of those guys, he'll come over and take the money, but he's not going to fucking, kill himself for these people. Like he was really trying to get over in 89. When he did, he got over. I don't think he was motivated to work that hard for those people anymore.
Our next question, Jim, was emailed in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Dennis. Am I confused, or do I remember?
Yes, you are. Yes.
Am I confused, or do I remember Big John Studd on the Memphis-Louisville circuit for a short period of time? If so, do you recall the angle? What are your thoughts on Studd as a worker in general, and did you ever work with him, or were you ever around him? I was wondering if he was as surly in real life as he was in his character. For example, I know he was known to no-sell at times. I think he is often overlooked for his contributions in the 1980s when the WWF really took off.
You're confused. But I can go deep enough on this that maybe you are really just confused instead of just completely insane, because no, Big John Studd, nor Chuck the Monster O'Connor, nor Captain USA, nor John Minton, any name that he ever used, ever worked the Memphis territory. However, there was a similar looking fellow in the mid-70s because named Ed Kowalski that was wrestling and a tall and blonde at the same time as Stud got into business as Chuck O'Connor. And they were sometimes confused, but Ed Kowalski became Ed Wiskoski and was totally a different person. And that's the, but no, to my knowledge, he never ever worked anywhere in the Memphis territory. Louisville, Memphis, Evansville, Lexington, Nashville, or Tupelo for that matter.
Were you ever around him?
Not really, no. No, I've met him a couple of times, but honestly, no. Once again, he was a WWF guy during that era, where I was never there, they were never here, and then and he's another guy that didn't have a super long. I mean, the only time I would have been around him would have been briefly in the mid '90s on just a WWF event or two or whatever at that point, right? Am I forgetting a big long run he had during that era?
I don't think you would have been there when he was in the WWF. He was gone. He left in '89. He returned and then he quit because the first show I ever went to, the main event was going to be Andre the Giant versus John Studd. I was very excited about that. Looking back now, 1989, Andre the Giant as a heel versus babyface John Studd does not sound very enticing, but he walked out before then. So instead I got Hillbilly Jim versus Andre the Giant.
Then I'm thinking maybe a couple times in the 90s on a fan fest or whatever. I thought it might be a WWF event, but anyway, but not really anything appreciable. No, but he was actually, he got so big and so immobile that, you know, he gets a bad rap. But once again, in the 70s, when he first got into business, he was Ox Baker's partner in Indianapolis for Dick the Bruiser. And they put the tag belts on those guys. And holy fuck, because we'd seen the Blackjacks and then the Valiant Brothers, who were my all-time favorite, you know, WWA tag team champions, the Handsome Jimmy and Luscious Johnny, and the Legionnaires, right? But here comes Ox Baker and Chuck O'Connor. And O'Connor at that point was still as tall, but had to be I think they billed him as 320, 325. He was still pretty big, but he could move around. And there's Ox Baker, who looks better physically and visually, just without moving, than any heel has a right to look. And what a fucking tag team. So when Bruiser and Crusher come in, we're like, fuck, you know, these guys, they could beat Bruiser and Crusher because I'm fucking 13 or whatever. And so I was a fan of his there. But like much of the 80s WWF, they swallowed up all the passion, in-ring passion of all but the best talents.
A couple more questions here this week, Jim. This one was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Rodney Esty.
Oh, I tell you. Hey, Rod, I tell you.
Hey, everybody, we're all going to get laid. All right, and that's the end of the drive-thru this week and forever. Go fuck yourself and goodbye. No. Here's Rodney's question. If I remember correctly, a crew was sent to document Corny's road to WrestleMania a few years ago, perhaps to Orlando. Whatever happened to this?
Oh, without going into too much granular detail that people would be bored by, a number of members of the company that was shooting that left to do their own thing, and the footage wallowed in obscurity for some time, but has of late, it still exists, and there is a possibility that there may be some work continuing on that for an eventual resolution.
All right. We'll
That's pretty much. Thank you, Rodney, for asking the question that had the most boring answer of any question ever on a drive-thru.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Ron Atkins. Jay Lethal is for sure one of the top wrestlers in the world. He can go in the ring and on the mic. He's the Ring of Honor champ, and he has held that title before and had success in TNA. In my opinion, he's every bit as good a worker as Booker T or a Ron Simmons, as well as guys from a generation before. Is his not being in the WWE affecting his legacy as a performer? I think he's as good as any wrestler, but as far as the best African-American wrestler, he may have a case.
Well, that's why I was wondering why he got compared to Ron Simmons and who else was it earlier in Booker T.
Just so you know, the subject line here, and I probably should have read it now reading the whole thing, Jay Lethal's legacy as one of the best African-American wrestlers hurt by being in Ring of Honor.
Okay. Well, I agree. Jay is phenomenal, and he's always been one of my favorite in-ring performers. I was able to, thanks to TNA being stupid at that particular time, and me knowing Bill Barron's Jay's agent, landed Jay in 2000, was it 10 or 11 for Ring of Honor, and he's been there ever since. I have continued to be gobsmacked with, I don't know whether it was timing or what, but that Ring of Honor, or that the WWE has hired anyone from Ring of Honor and not Jay Lethal, amazes me. The fact that any major wrestling company has not tried to snatch Jay Lethal away from Ring of Honor amazes me. And I'm not saying he's wallowing in obscurity there. He's done a tremendous job. He's been the champion, and his work is perfect, especially for that environment. But no, Jay should be AJ Styles level guy in the WWF, WWE, making really big fucking checks because he's an amazing performer. And I don't know why that has never happened. And it's not because of any bad habits he has personally. To my knowledge, he has none. Never known him to have any. He was the go-to guy when we want to do PR because he was good with sponsors. He's well-spoken. He's articulate. He's intelligent. He's responsible. He shows up on time and doesn't embarrass the company. I'm sure Ring of Honor is compensating him well, but once again, this is a guy, in my opinion, that should be in a featured match. I'm not saying everybody can main event WrestleMania, but this guy should be featured at a high level, like Seth Rollins at a high level in the biggest company in the world. And why they have not figured that out, I have no idea how that hasn't happened. And maybe he just didn't want to. I don't know. I don't know why that anybody would be hired away from any companies and Jay Lethal not get snatched.
As far as legacy goes, I don't know if it's the main event or not, but he's about to defend the Ring of Honor World title at Madison Square Garden and be the first outside world champion to do that in, how long?
1961, and then, outside world champion, where that was during the time where they weren't even recognizing a champion in New York.
Yeah.
Until Rogers came along anyway. But as far as, I don't even think you have to pigeonhole him as one of the great African-American. He's one of the great wrestlers of modern times. And I'm sorry, Booker was great looking physically, but I'd never seen Booker T have matches like, I never saw Ron Simmons. He had a whole different style, but he was not the complete in-ring performer that Jay Lethal is.
Our final question this week, Jim, was sent in the CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Ray. My question is about the Nature Boy moniker. Recently, Jim has spoken a lot about the many professional wrestlers that have held the name, but I was wondering if he might be able to shed some light on what exactly the name Nature Boy means. I apologize if this question has been asked before, but I've not managed to hear an answer to it.
Well, it doesn't really mean anything when you think about it. I guess, does everybody know about the Nat King Cole song, or no. Is that even?
The answer
okay, no. I guess they don't. There was the reason why that Buddy Rogers took the name Nature Boy was because there was a hit song by Nat King Cole called Nature Boy. There was a boy, a very strange enchanted boy who traveled near and far, whatever the fuck. And I guess in the 40s, you see the snappy, cracking, wise, patter that they had in the 40s movies. People that were nattily dressed or, snooty or whatever the fuck, Nature Boy. And fucking Buddy Rogers thought that might be a good idea. Started calling himself Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. He had the jackets and the tan, and it became really to mean what Buddy Rogers wanted it to mean, which was, it's him. But the song was the fucking catalyst. And it's like a lot of great gimmicks. It's just a simple thing that when you try to analyze it, doesn't really fucking mean much, but he made it something.
I think it was Steve Austin who did an interview in I don't know, maybe 2003, 2004. It was him and Flair in the ring together. Austin said, Nature Boy. What does that mean? Do you like nature or do you like boys? Well, with that, the drive-thru is closed. I'm waiting for you to play one of your sound effects.
I'll let you get away with that one.
All right. Well, you guys know how it works. We'll be back next week on Monday. And, of course, you can listen to the Jim Cornette Experience. And then I think about it, I can't say when you usually see it or hear it. I guess it'll be what? We'll put it up. I can't. Fucking bullshit.
I dare you to leave that in.
I'm going to leave that in. I have no idea when the Experience is going to air. And that's on Mr. Cornette.
I'm going to take this death march to New York and back, go 3 days without sleep to provide the wrestling fans with high-quality MLW programming, doing my part. Then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to watch this fucking marathon goddamn assault on my eyeballs. It's going to be known as WrestleMania. And then as soon as I get up the next day, I'm going to call you, and we're going to record a show. And that's as close as I can get myself. And then it's up to you.
Well, stay tuned. Stay tuned. The best way to find out when that will actually be dropping is on Twitter. You can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette.
Oh, I won't have time to tweet this week.
You can follow me on Twitter at GreatBrianLast. And, of course, you can check out all the shows on YouTube at tinyurl.com/official corny YouTube, or just go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette. And thank you to everyone that has subscribed and everyone who's been checking out those videos. We really do appreciate it. We also want to remind you that you can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast, The Mothership, available at 605pod.com, or available wherever you find your favorite podcasts, classic wrestling talk and wrestling humor, and some sound effects. The 605 Super Podcast.
It's now with sound effects. And
course.
some of the humor's even funny.
Some of it.
Every once in a while.
You want some funny humor, you can go to Cornette's Collectibles at JimCornette.com and get burger towels, autograph photos, t-shirts, DVDs, books, restraining orders, and I think that's it. No more action figures for now, but they're coming back soon. I know a lot of people have been asking, when are there going to be more action figures in stock? Stay tuned.
Right now, my figure is in action.
I'm going to leave that in too. Of course,
I have an inactive figure.
Well, I guess that's a great way to end this show. Until next time, for Jim Cornette, I'm the Great Brian Last. Tally ho.